The weather today is perfectly expressed by the words of Charles Dickens, who describes one of those March days when the sun shines hot and the wind blows cold, when it is summer in the light and winter in the shade. And here, come wind, rain or sunshine this March, our bulb theatre continues to cheerfully usher in the joyfully expectant feeling of spring. A warm welcome to our small space garden tour to each new face and old friends who've joined us here before. The bulb theatre on our garden table displays dinkier sized pots which are easy to switch around, so as different plants approach their zenith, they can be moved from the wings to take the spotlight. There's no need to plan for height difference as you might with a border, because containers can be stood on discrete upturned pots when extra height is needed. Oops, sorry Mr. Hellebore. As the performance of each bulb, or corm, or tuber comes to a close, these containers have the advantage of being a small enough size to tuck away out of sight, where foliage can be left to die down naturally as the bulbs go dormant over summer. If your garden or balcony is too bijou for hiding places and you have narcissi or alliums in a very well drained soil or compost, their container can be used as a stand in their dormant season. Once their foliage has browned, just place another slightly larger pot containing summer flowers on top. This works for some tulips too, but they are best moved to a shady spot with an upturned dish over them to keep soil dry when the container above is watered. From November, expose your containers to the light again. Crocus Tommasinianus brings a gorgeous amethyst glow to our table arrangement, and early colour to patio pots in the leafy interlude before narcissi and tulip flowers open. This is pretty cultivar Whitewell Purple. Author and garden designer Vita Sackville-West described in her 1946 poem The Garden the lavender cups of tiny crockery, which seems an endearingly fitting description, evoking the translucency of bone china in the way light illuminates petals. Although to the bumblebees imbibing nectar from these flowers, they are not so much dainty drinking vessels as giant thirst-quenching goblets of sustenance. At Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, seen here in early February, there's an ethereal magic to the ultraviolet shimmer of the early crocus carpet. The true species, as seen growing here, has a more silver-washed lilac appearance. There are several cultivars in shades of white, pink and purple, and they are easy to grow from corms placed 10 centimetres or 4 inches down in sun or partial shade, and are popular in beds, borders, containers and naturalised in grass. They do have a tendency to spread, as evident at Sissinghurst Castle, where over the years they have seeded themselves in a slow motion tide from one area to the next. So this plant will delight you in its generosity, but over the years may require a degree of vigilance and management to remove unwanted runaways. There's something elfishly mischievous in the way they can pop up in your pathway, and in Germany they are known rather adorably as the elfin crocus. Cultivated since the Victorian era, they became affectionately known as Tommies, and their species name is a tribute to the botanist and mayor of Trieste, Muzio Giuseppe Spirito de Tommasini. Enthusiasts of historical TV drama may recognise here the fictional Yorkshire country estate called Downton Abbey from the acclaimed series of the same name. In reality, this iconic castle is Highclere in Hampshire, the birthplace in 1778 of the Honourable and Very Reverend William Herbert, whose seminal description of the species of our very crocus was published in 1847. The talented third son of Henry Herbert, 1st Earl of Carnarvon, William Herbert was a classical scholar, linguist, naturalist, botanical illustrator. This depiction, published in Edward's Botanical Register in 1844, shows a confident hand and graphic style. He was also an early evolutionist, name-checked in the writings of Charles Darwin, a reforming MP, and a clergyman rising to the position of Dean of Manchester Cathedral. William Herbert contributed greatly to the translation and popularity of Scandinavian literature in England, and we hope he forgives this reimagining of the meaning behind his words. I had one gem, preserved with precious care, my hope, my treasure. Who so fit to wear that jewel as my friend? With partial voice him unsolicited, I bade rejoice. My heart's best pride, the darling of my sight, was freely proffered by a parent's choice. A form so perfect and a mind so bright, she seemed a living beam of heaven's immortal light. Bulb display, Crocus Ladykiller is beautifully dressed, a supremely sophisticated early caller which began flowering at the start of February. The purple stained petals are particularly appealing, and Prince Claus also revels in the same eye-catching style, slightly taller in stature, with petals taking on an indigo hue in low light. This March we spotted Prince Claus displayed in the top courtyard at Sissinghurst Castle Garden, in one of the old stone sinks that Vita Sackville West repurposed and raised up on bricks. Small, delicate flowers do look particularly beautiful displayed in aged lichen-covered receptacles, including the intense and enchanting Siberian squill. Ladykiller keeps the foliage brief. Prince Claus has a lot more leaf. But as we all know, a long leaf isn't everything. The dreamy flowers of Anemone Coronaria Harmony Blue have heart-meltingly intense violet blue saturation, generous petals, and a smart velvety central black boss. Petals do not spoil in the rain, but take care not to let soggy foliage from other plants rest against them. They will show their displeasure by going brown. Although we refer to this flower as part of the bulb display, it is really a tuberous plant. Like bulbs and corms, tubers are an underground hub of energy and nutrients. Tuberous plants tend not to be as frost hardy as bulbs. A classic example is the dahlia. These anemones are sold as hardy for much of the UK. The Hardy Harmony series includes lovely lilac-y Harmony Pearl. delicate flower head of Scilla Messeniaca opens to a loose orbit of tiny stars in a heavenly blue that's to sigh for. The colour reminds me of one of our favourite agapanthus, Lavender Haze. Leaves emerge with a rigid sculptural beauty and slowly extend into slender, shiny straps looking similar to agapanthus leaves. We originally bought 10 bulbs to plant in our shady border, as they thrive in partial or full shade, and we love the sight of great pools of them in dappled light under the trees at RHS Wisley. However, the ground in our garden was extremely waterlogged last autumn, and since these bulbs require well-drained soil, I decided to plant them in pots of peat-free compost. This cautious approach was also a reflection of their price, over £3 per bulb. They are rare and rather precious. The form at Wisley differs subtly from our plants, reflecting their respective origins in different native populations. They come from north-facing cliffs in Greece on the Peloponnese Peninsula. Our Scilla Messeniaca deserve a far more thought-through ornamental container, as these were just planted in what was to hand at the time. I think zinc would work well with the pale blue flowers, so when Salvia Josh gets sized up into a bigger pot this year, because I think he's going to need it, this current container will probably become the new home for our Scilla. I remember once reading the garden writer in a national magazine dismiss grape hyacinths as horrid little plants. Ouch! Don't listen, guys. Admittedly, they are strong naturalisers, which can mean a cheeky tendency to multiply into other areas of the garden. But they are obliging ground cover if you want to hide bare patches of earth in spring, and planted in meandering drifts, create charming rivers of blue through borders. They have a faint scent of grape, or is that just the brain's suggestibility to the grape hyacinth name for these upturned bunches? They grow happily in containers for close appreciation of their stacked pyramids of rounded florets. And most importantly, bees do not think them horrid. Bees adore them above almost anything else. We began our 4 moods of blue with the generous flower heads of Anemone Harmony Blue, and we're completing the quartet with the tiniest of exquisite flowers, one of the most commonly found UK wildflowers, the dog violet. This heart-leaved spreading evergreen is predominantly the purple foliage variety in our garden, with one green-leaved exception, and has arrived here entirely through self-seeding. These plants are particularly adept at making paving cracks and grit-covered bulb containers their home. There's one thing children will always ask: why are they called dog violets? Some say the puzzling term denotes their so-called inferior status due to their lack of scent when compared to another UK native, the sweet violet, which is blessed with romantic powdery perfume. But to complicate matters, dog is also an archaic word for twigs once used to make butchers' skewers, and the dog violet can become prolific in areas of coppiced woodland. So if anyone knows the true origin of the term, please comment below. In the wild, these are the essential caterpillar food source for a number of beautiful fritillary butterflies. In the garden, they are snacks for snails. Hungry ants are often responsible for dispersing the violet seeds, attracted to a nutritious fleshy part called the Erysimum, and without the ants we would not attract the occasional wheat ears that hop across the brick path, feeding on them when these birds visit the garden in spring on their annual migration from Africa. So these tiniest of flowers make their own contribution to an important wider ecosystem. Crocus yellow mammoth is such a rich, glorious gold, to my eye almost orange. Buds began opening in February, and then March flicked the switch for the whole grid to light up, and a bowl full of cheerful, glowing amber light bulbs has been brightening even the greyest of days ever since. The warmth of yellow mammoth is echoed in the orangey red corona and swept back rich yellow petals of Narcissus Jetfire. I like to dot them around the table display planted individually, because we can then paint with little splashes of colour here and there, allowing for a more singular appreciation of their beauty. Each Jetfire flower is a dose of pocket rocket fuel feeding the soul. Question: what better sight than a heavenly Hellebore with a happily foraging bumblebee queen? That's easy. 2 heavenly Hellebores with 2 happily foraging queens. Pink Frost is a reliable and lovely perennial evergreen Hellebore. All ours are grown in containers, happy in sunshine, but we also have a beauty in a shady corner with barely any direct sunlight, which I think is now about 7 years old. Patio pot plants spend the summer eclipsed in the shadow of tall annuals without complaint. They seem to live happily in containers of all shapes and sizes, but the bigger the volume of available soil or compost, the bigger they will grow. They like organic matter, a mulch to retain moisture, and the occasional feed, but are forgiving if you forget. Like many Hellebores, they undergo intriguing colour changes. Rose-tinged buds on burgundy stems open to a pale creamy pink flower. This can't happen soon enough for impatient bumblebees who try to force their way in. The pretty petals are actually sepals, and on the plant's evolutionary path, petals evolved into the green central ring of tubular nectaries. Over time, the sepals blush into a richer shade of pink, especially if you tell them how gorgeous they look every time you walk past. Flowers take on increasingly rich coppery burgundy tones, which look magnificent against zingy greens. 8 to 12 weeks later, sepals turn green and begin to disappear under a flush of attractive foliage, which I always think looks almost tropical. In September, random new Hellebore flowers are still being occasionally produced amongst the miniature begonia blooms. Pink Frost will obligingly tolerate a little minor root disturbance. We plant foxglove seedlings and shade-tolerant annuals around this container for summer-long interest. The initial purchase of a Hellebore always seems a little pricey. They are comparatively expensive plants, but their value in terms of perennial performance, months of pollinator and people-pleasing, chameleon-spirited flowers, and all-round versatility makes them a great garden investment. A white snake's head fritillary has emerged amongst the checkered burgundy pink forms, seeming all the more impactful in its single elegant presence. Meanwhile, cheery daffodil Rijnveld's early sensation was puzzlingly reluctant to flower. It is not uncommon to see these blooming in late December in sheltered urban areas, and I had mistakenly anticipated pairing it with early white Hellebore winter gold back in January. As buds finally began opening in March, I wondered if the generous heads would overpower the more delicate features of the lower tier table display, but actually they seemed to shine down like an overstory of bright guardian suns. They also add their sunshine presence to the patio pot display. But I have to admit, it's Narcissus Verger that has completely stolen my heart. The petals emerge primrose yellow, fast fading to a beautiful cream, making the striking orange cupcake case corona even more eye-catching. We had expected the perianth to be white as described on the bulb packet, but nonetheless, this cream is more than delicious. Also appetising, but in quite the wrong way, is our Narcissus minnow, which is charming and fragrant. The petals are being eaten often before buds even get the chance to open. Come on, own up to it. Another heart-flutteringly pretty Narcissus, which opened just yesterday, is Bulbicodium Spoirot, with its elegant contrast of tiny, slender reflexed petals around the hoop petticoat of a trumpet. Now positioned for admiring gazers at the front of the bulb theatre, it is truly dainty and delightful. It has the most wonderful luminosity, even in overcast conditions. Lovely sun-loving Erysimum Leya White is an invaluable perennial wallflower for pollinators. Erysimum are known for being low maintenance and often vibrant blooms like the classic Bowles mauve. Although relatively short-lived perennials, they are nectar-rich and have a long flowering season. Irresistible to all pollinators, from hummingbird hawk moths arriving in the garden very early this year, to the tiny yellow-legged mining bees with their energetic upside-down feeding antics. There are over 1,500 different species of mining bee around the globe, and many types will visit only one or just a few specific host plants. But the yellow-legged mining bee will happily visit just about every flower in the garden, sometimes for a long feast, sometimes for a short snack. Such a cute little bee. And sometimes she is shy. We hope you've enjoyed the garden this March, and our heartfelt appreciation to everyone who shows their support and enjoyment by subscribing to Apple P Fern C. Thank you so much. Until next time, we wish you all flowerful times and nature-soothed minds.